Okay, I'm going to call the meeting to order. Pursuant to Governor Baker's July 14, 2022 revised order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, Chapter 38, Section 18, meetings of the Berkshire Hills Regional School District School Committee will be conducted both in person and remote until further notice. In-person attendance is limited to Berkshire Hills Regional School District School Committee members, superintendent, and district school administrators. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted at this time. Agenda items listed are those reasonably anticipated by the chair. Not all items listed may in fact be discussed. Items not listed may be brought up for discussion to the extent permitted by law. This meeting is being recorded by CPSD and school committee recorder and will be broadcast once transcribed and approved. Minutes will be made public and posted to our website. We do have some people in the room who are invited guests who are here tonight, but they are on the agenda, so that's why they are here. So we'll start with a roll call in attendance. Ann Hutchinson here. Jason St. Peter here. Bonnie Bonboni.
I am not seeing Bonnie.
Okay. Molly Thomas.
Here.
Bill Fields here. Diane Singer.
Here.
Corey Sprague.
Here.
And there is her feedback.
It's because you and me are both on.
I'm all. He doesn't show it. I think about it. Okay, let's turn this right over to the superintendent.
Okay. First of all, I'd like to welcome a number of students who are here today. And in particular, I'd like to thank Zoe Holmes for her service on the school committee. And we'll celebrate that at another time. What I'd like to do, though, tonight is start with 3 awards for students. And I've got little bios on each of the students that I'll read. The first one is the Massachusetts Association of School Superintendents Award, and it's a certificate of academic excellence, and that's for Zoe. So let me give you that, and congratulations. And then I'll read why we're recommending you. Okay, so Zoe goes above and beyond what is presented and expected in class. She comes to school prepared to learn. She's inspired by knowledge, and she takes her education seriously. As an 11th grader, Zoe was part of a team that developed the curriculum for our Introduction to Healthcare course, which started this school year. Zoe is a teacher's assistant in the class, implementing and delivering a program she helped create. After completing AP Spanish as a junior, Zoe is currently doing an independent study in Spanish, which includes 2 meetings a week with a Spanish teacher in Ecuador to work on communication skills, culture, and grammar. Zoe is a junior camp counselor at Camp High Rock and has held that position for the last 3 summers after attending the same camp as a child. She's a 4-year member of both the cross-country and swim teams at Monument, and she's been involved in club swimming since the age of 6. The level of investment in her extracurriculars is noteworthy. Above all, Zoe is honest, a good communicator, and empathetic. She's giving of her time. She listens well to others' perspectives, and she's a valuable member of our school and local community, including the school committee, which you've been involved with for a couple of years. So thank you. We really celebrate you. The next 2 awards are from the New England School Development Council, and I'm going to recognize Jacob Schron and Andrew La Rochelle. Oh, good. So I'll do the same. I'll start with Jacob and then Andrew, and I'll read little blurbs on them. And all of you are just like extraordinary students and people. So Jacob's been an instrumental student leader since he arrived at Monument, along with being an excellent student. Jacob's significant credibility is rooted in his integrity, humility, and mindful insight and empathy towards others. He has led the YATS initiative, where he has been a trained facilitator since his freshman year, which manifested in the creation of the Student Adult Advisory Board. Jacob spearheaded the work of the Saab Communication Subcommittee and the development of Student Square that has gone officially online as of this year. Jacob has also maintained a part-time job at the Prairie Whale restaurant throughout high school. He was inducted into the National Honor Society last year and was honored at our Junior Scholarship Award last June. Jacob has been part of our computer science program and is intending to major in computer science or engineering in college. Congratulations, Jacob. Okay, and then Andrew, this is a fun one to share. As one of his teachers has simply and accurately stated, Andrew is a force. He has excelled in all of his classes each year and is currently taking courses beyond what we offer in the areas of Spanish and calculus. Andrew possesses incredible processing speed. He's able to integrate new ideas instantly, and there is seemingly no material that he cannot master. Andrew has a long list of areas where he has provided support to others that include, but are not limited to, being a Spanish tutor, an assistant teacher at Muddy Brook and at Hevra, a social work volunteer in Peru, and a translator at the Red Lion Inn. Andrew has a humble, matter-of-fact approach to communicating that is attractive and non-threatening. He's a standout role model for his peers, and he has helped other student athletes bring out their best selves as a captain of the cross-country team for multiple years. Andrew is kind, honest, and he makes all around him just plain better. Congratulations. Of all the things I get to do, sharing these awards and graduations and dropping in on classes are some of the highlights. I really appreciate all you've done as individuals and all you do for the broader community. Thank you. So we're going to move on to other stuff. If you are transitioning to like a celebratory dinner, now's a great time to run out. And I'd kind of like to join you, but I can't. And if you want to stay, you're welcome to stay, but do whatever works. Okay, take care. Okay, we're going to share a little bit of good news from the schools, and then we're going to have a couple longer reports. Katie, we'll start with you at Muddy Brook. Anything you want to give us a quick update on?
Sure. We had our first all school assembly Friday on the 16th. It was nice to do the songs and be all together in the same room. On Monday, we had the folks came and gave our third and fourth graders a show of an assembly presentation for the Indigenous Peoples Day. Yeah, that's about it. I'll go for it.
Okay. Sorry, now we're getting a little feedback again. I'll try to fix that. Ben's out for personal reasons. I'm just going to share a couple quick updates. No, John, it has
this volume.
Oh, good. I think it's this, but I don't know. There was a neat article in today's New York Times about some of the work at Du Bois, and I just saw it late this afternoon, but there's some great pictures, and it's around the work of crew or advisory in response to the pandemic and coming off the pandemic. So again, I'll send the link around.
So what I'm getting from people is you're the only one that we can do. Or, I guess if anyone's going to speak, they're going to have to come
Maybe.
up here. And I am faintly audible, which tells me it's using your computer.
All right, so I'm trying to restart it. I'm also trying to organize the meeting and deal with stuff that's substantive. Those might start working in a sec. Yeah, I don't. Should we unplug the owls and,
I think they're going to have to.
yeah,
They're not recruiting for that.
no, I don't know why there's all that feedback.
I don't think that will do.
I don't think it's worked. Maybe that's better.
As long as people in the audience can hear us, yes.
Okay. Molly, can you hear us? Wave if you can hear me.
Peter, I can hear you and I can hear Steve, but the other side of the table, I don't know.
All right, so we'll have people work around my computer. I'm sorry, it's frustrating, but that's where we are. So Keith, you were going to share a couple things from the high school, so come and sit next to me and share them.
If anyone in the audience can't hear, just raise your hand so we know it.
We might, if it's okay, we might stand here. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Keith Wright, I'm assistant principal at Monument. And I had the pleasure of helping to organize a retreat at Camp High Rock for the Student and Adult Advisory Board. We're here together because honestly, this is really like what we did for 2 days straight. We envisioned what we thought would be an even better version of Monument Self. And we did that through the skilled facilitation from our partners Up for Learning, but I think even more meaningful facilitators that were trained by Up for Learning in advance. So the students really ran a lot of the retreat in collaboration with adults. And I was very proud of the 42 students and 11 staff members that went on the retreat. But I was very nervous right up until the end because there was only one measure of success that I had, and that was, will we come out of this with a group of committees that have an agenda that they can work on when we get back to school? And so I'll turn it over to you now.
Hi, I'm Mia. Yeah, so we all sat together in a group and came up with different ideas that we had to improve the school, to make it better, and to just change it so it's more diverse and suitable for our learning. So the first one that we came up with is the academic advisement assistance with school-wide goals and just setting main goals for the school. Communication, having better communication with teachers, students, and of course administration. Diversion, equity, and inclusion, how we can include ELL members as well as LGBTQ, POC, like just many different ways that we can make our school a more inclusive and more so that we have that base so that we can all learn at the same rate without those blocks getting in the way. And then we have environmental work. A girl, I think her name was Hope, She mentioned that the school lunches have a lot of plastic in them. And we're just trying to maybe recycle, get the school more eco-friendly, maybe start a compost so that we can reduce our footprint. And then the last one is wellness. So that focuses on mental health and an advisory working, so students have just more outlets they can go to if they feel overwhelmed, if they need somebody to talk to. Yeah.
So I guess in closing, I would say that it's really rewarding work when we can partner with the experts who are kind of the eyes and ears of the place to push forward an even better version of Monument.
That's terrific. Thank you very much.
Some of the outcomes of that work, and we'll see them in another time, but they had like millions of flip charts and graphs and other things. And I think there are a lot of opportunities there. Okay. So what I'd like to do next is, oh, I'm sorry, Christy, we had one little thing from you. Join me in the hot seat. Okay.
Okay, so I do want to provide a little bit of an update connected to our assistant coaches for our fall soccer. And I want to offer an apology. There was some confusion. You might remember that we came forward with the request that you approve 2 assistant coaches to be booster club funded. After some questioning from the booster clubs themselves, we did a little digging. And so I just want to provide context as to what happened. The proposal to shift to the soccer booster clubs funding these 2 coach positions came in January of 2020 as part of the context of that budget season. And as you all know, like we all do, the budget was approved in March of 2020, which was when we were right in the throes of the pandemic. Those shifts in the budget did not ever happen. So we had proposed a cut to the coaches line. The coaches line was not cut. 2 years went past where the district was actually paying for all of the assistant coaches for all of the booster clubs because of the lack of ability to raise funds. And then this year was the first year that we were going back to asking booster clubs to pay for their coaches. The soccer teams had not historically done that because of numbers, and the numbers of students participating are still high. That cut was never made, and we have the funding in our salary line for coaches to cover it. So I apologize for the confusion. We've communicated it to the booster clubs, and I just wanted to share that publicly.
Okay,
Great.
thanks.
You have to ask the questions. Because you don't want sneakers.
So Christy, 2 questions. What prompted the original cut or the original proposal to shift? And then what is happening now going forward?
So what prompted the original proposal to shift was that was the year that each of the principals was asked to cut $170,000 from our budget. And that was part of my proposal as how I was going to get to the 170,000. Not all of those proposed cuts actually wound up being approved and incorporated into the budget that year. And this was one that didn't move forward. And that was just a miss on our part coming out of the pandemic. So we're pleased that we still have the money on our coach's salary line. We're going into the budget season. That's not something I'm looking at doing right now. But we'll have to see where the whole budget lands this year, I suppose.
Anyone else?
Okay, thanks. Steve, do you want to do the minutes now?
No.
Okay, literally. Okay. What I'd like to do now are have John literally come up, but I'll show the slides. There two major updates we want to share tonight. One is about English language learners. And this is something we've shared updates about English language learners, but this is the first time we've shared a data set with the school committee. I think around this work. So we'll share that. All the PowerPoint slides we're going to show tonight will be up on our website. Likely not tomorrow, but on Tuesday, Monday's Indigenous Peoples Day. So we're not in session, but they'll all be available on Monday. The English language learner one is relatively short. The MCAS one is quite long. So let me just pull that up. And John, you're going to want to sit here.
The problem maybe is that people are not here. They would be able to see that. Let's hope so.
I'm gonna
Shares the screen.
share the screen, so you should be able to. Okay, can you see it?
Yeah. It's good.
Okay.
All right, here we go. So I'm here to present an English language education, also known as ELE or ELE updates. So the first slide is about our student enrollment and our Title I funds. If you see on the right, our student enrollment from school years 21 to 23. And in 2021, the district had 54 English language learners students classified as English language learners. In 2022, we had a large increase up to 70. And as you see this year, we have the similar increase of 16 students up to 86 this year. 8 of those students potentially have moved out of the district. We're currently figuring that out. Some of them may stay, some may have moved out of state. So if we look to the left, our numbers.
Is your microphone
Yeah,
on?
sorry. No, I'm not in the meeting.
Okay.
Our numbers are increasing. You see our Title III funds, which are our funds that we get from the feds through DESE. It's not a lot. It's basically $100 per student. So we don't get a lot of funds from the federal government to support these students. Next slide, please. Sorry, I had that work. I think you're seeing that. You see the snapshots? Yep.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, I get the forward too. So here is our access snapshot. Access is essentially the English language learners English proficiency test that they take every February. You can see this is the district. On the top right one, we see 25 students increase their levels. That means that they became more proficient in English language. 2 students stayed the same, 8 students dropped. If you look to our left, you see 25 of our students in the top left are level 1. Level 1 is the least proficient students, and then it goes all the way up to level 6. Once they get past level 4, they become formally flipped. They're former English language learners. So we're really just looking at categories 1 through 4. And then we see our progression in the bottom left throughout the years. And then in the middle of the bottom, you can see how our enrollment has increased. We go to the next slide, please. So then we break it down by school. In Muddy Brook last year, we had 22 students test, 11 moving left to right, 11 increased their levels, 1 went down, and 0 stayed the same. And then you see bottom left, the student progression over the years. And what we're looking at really, again, and we'll look at this with the MCAS data too, when we're looking at these line graphs, we're really trying to match up with 2019 because 2020 and 21 are not comparable years because of the pandemic. So that data really isn't what we want to look at. And we can see that our levels in the middle school go up and down, but stay fairly the same. They're down this year, but increased in the other schools. And then we can see the student change over the years from 2018 to 2022. Again, we're presenting a lot of information, and we'll have questions at the end. And this is sorry.
I
Middle
meant
school?
to the middle school, yeah.
Yep.
Right.
We just did the middle school. Yeah.
Okay.
I wasn't moving mine forward, sorry. And then we get to high school, we had 30 students test last year, 7 increased their levels, 2 stayed the same, 1 went down, and we're almost back at our 2019 level. If you look at the bottom left, and then you see the giant increase at the high school. That's where most of our students have been coming in to the district in the past couple of years, especially last year and this year, a large increase at the high school level. So that's our snapshot of the access data, which is the test that all English language learners take in the late winter, early spring. So what are we doing to help increase student proficiency levels for our English language learners? We've added, the school committee has approved 2.0 FTEs. One of those teachers is at Muddy Brook right now. The other one is at the high school. And we've made some shifts with those based on the numbers at each school. At Muddy Brook right now, there's about 35 students, and at the high school, there are 38, I believe. We started a SLIFE program. SLIFE is students with limited or interrupted formal education, also known as newcomers. That was the term that we're using a lot last year. SLIFE is the more appropriate term. We went through a application process through DESE to get a SLIFE program approved in the district. We're one of the few low incidence districts that has a dedicated SLIFE program. We also have increased training for all staff. We now have all staff and paraprofessionals able to take WIDA training free through monies provided by DESE. We've increased curricular supports, and we're continuing to increase curricular supports. And those are just a list of some of the things there that we've done. We've increased family supports. We have a family liaison, which is a partnership through VIM. We've increased our translation and interpretation services, one online, and increased some in-person ones as well. And we've had many family engagement events that have been very well attended. And those are not just for the English language learner families, but for all families to engage in. We have interpretation services there. And just last week, we submitted a grant to English language learner education support grant, which is focused on curriculum development and program support, which again is focused for our SLIFE program, but will be for all 3 schools. So that's our update on English language education.
Questions? I'll ask one question. The SLIFE program, other than it's a good thing to do, what do we get out of it? Is there extra funding? Is there extra support anywhere?
We have the Office of Language Acquisition at DESE has increased their level of support, and I'm in contact with them all the time. They have increased their levels of support. There isn't monetary support until this grant was just came out, was due last week, and we submitted. So that's the monetary support, and it's more geared towards, unfortunately, high incidence districts, but we were able to apply for 1 category of the 3 categories in that grant. So they are doing a phenomenal job supporting us, but there isn't a ton of money either from DESE or the federal government.
Any other questions? I see none.
Okay. So let's move on to the next thing. This is sort of unusual. Everybody knows about Jules, right? In the last 5 years, as a nation, we were about this close to eliminating teen smoking, and then Jules came out, and then it all fell apart. There's several lawsuits happening on the national level. We have an opportunity to join one, and what's in front of you is an agreement with a law firm. Their interest in doing it is, and I'll channel Rich Mahoney a little bit on this, that incremental policy shifts don't change corporations' behaviors. What changes corporations' behaviors are lawsuits when they get hit in the pocketbook. So the intent of joining this lawsuit, and I strongly recommend we do it is that resources will come out of the lawsuit when hopefully it eventually is settled, and we can use those resources to educate and support students. The attorney's intent is changing the behavior, but it's also generating money for themselves, right? I think this makes sense. But before I can sign us up for it, I need the committee's support to do so. I'm happy to respond to questions if folks have them.
Have we run this by our attorney?
Yeah, I ran it by our attorney. A number of districts are signing up for it. It's all contingency based, so we really don't have anything to lose except part of our earnings or winnings in the settlement.
Do I have any questions? Do I have a motion? Make a motion that we accept Peter's recommendation. Do I have a second?
Second,
So I have a motion and a second by Ian, motion by Bill. Any other discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote. Ian? Aye. Jason? Aye. Bonnie?
I don't know if she's trying to.
Molly?
yes.
Bill? Yes. Diane?
Yes.
Corey?
Aye.
And yes, unanimous.
Okay, good. Thank you for that. The next one is a little Education Week article I wanted to share. We're about to go into a really heavy duty conversation about standardized tests and testing. And I sort of see this conversation we're about to go into as the other side of the coin to the proficiency conversation that will start a little bit tonight, but really follow up on next week. As we get to the data around standardized testing, there's stuff in there that we can learn from, and there are opportunities for us to grow and do better. But it also makes sense to put it within context. When the commissioner talks about where we are with data, and John will reiterate some of this, 2019 was the last testing year that was sort of typical or normal. And then 20 and 21 were very unusual. Folks are talking about 2022 as a new baseline. So we'll talk about the data, and there are places we made great growth and there are places where we struggled. But I think it's just important to realize that in a broader context. The most obvious one is there are 180 days of school during the big years of the pandemic. Average students were out 15 to 20 days. That's like in the range of 10% of the time they weren't in school. And then on top of that, grown-ups got COVID and also weren't in school. So if it lined up the right way, if as a student you were out, and 20 was the average, right? Or 20 to 15 was the average, but some students were out 30 days, and then say you had multiple teachers and each of them were out 4 or 5 days for COVID, then your actual opportunity to learn was a significantly less than the 180 days. And that doesn't even count that, like, we're not all focused for every minute of 180 days to begin with. All right, so we need to look at the data in that context. But this article that I shared, and it was really short, this person, Shane Sophia, wrote this great book around street data, and there are really 3 big points in this. We shouldn't just look at big data. Big data is very sexy, and like the technocrats are really into big data, and there's something to be found there, right? And like this year, test scores in English statewide went down, and kids had a lot of trouble writing. All right, and some of that's true in our district, and we'll talk about it, but that's an important acknowledgement from a big data perspective. but we should also pay attention to small data. Often folks talk about achievement gaps, and that's one way of framing things. So some subgroup does really well and some subgroup does less well. The author of this is talking about also looking at opportunity gaps. So what are we doing as schools? What are we doing as systems? What are we doing as districts and states to either provide opportunities or not provide opportunities? And I thought that was interesting because it's sort of parallel to some of our work. And then the last one is listen to people on the margins on either end. I think Mia, what's so exciting about some of the stuff you were doing with Saab and the students is there are more voices, right? So it's not one generic voice in the middle, but it's a whole range of voices. So that's why I shared the article. What I want to do now is go into the MCAS data. Again, this is like a 39-page slide deck, and we're not going to read all the slides or beat you with the slides, but I think it's an important document that we can reflect on over time. There are two ways we look at data in it. So within the state system, there's a thing called EdWin, and that lets us look at data and manipulate things. Sort of interesting. Separately, the state hired this private company called Open Architects, which is around data visualization. So the access data you just saw was put together by the Open Architects people. So they take raw data files and they put it into fluid charts that when one is in the system, you can click on things and move it around. When we're presenting or giving you a set of slides, we can't move it around. But if anybody really wants to go deep into it, I'm happy to sit with you and we can get a big monitor going and click to our heart's content. But what I'm going to do is now let me share these sets of slides and we'll go through them together. Ben, I mentioned, isn't able to be here because he is a personal thing, and separately Miles is at a funeral. But Katie and Christy will talk about their schools. John and I will talk about some stuff district-wide, and then John and I will pinch hit for Ben on the local stuff. Just give me a sec. Okay, everybody can see that? And sorry, May, do you want to sit with somebody so you can see? Okay. Few things. I'll do a couple slides and I'll hand it over to John. What was new in 2022? So we're coming off the pandemic. There's all of that. We'll talk about that. A shift in how the tests are created in grades 3 through 10. So we're in this next generation MCAS test. And then the biology test is really different this year. So it's referred to as a 9th and 10th grade biology test, but our kids primarily take it in 9th grade. Pandemics, the last 3 years haven't been normal. Absenteeism, I talked a lot about. The best comparison is to 2019, because that's pre-pandemic. But again, the commissioner's talking about 2022 is the new baseline. So that's where we're starting and we're going from there. Statewide, there was an increase in math and a decrease in English. And the big opportunity was to improve written responses. So we did a really detailed dive or item analysis where we looked at every question and every response. And before the commissioner said statewide, there were issues around writing responses. It was clear as day that there were issues around open responses in writing, and for a variety of reasons, everybody had issues with that. I'll hand this over to John, and he'll do the next couple slides. Okay.
Okay, so we're not gonna read every line here for you, but so I just want to talk quickly about the difference between achievement and student growth percentile, because you'll see SGP or student growth percentile a lot. Achievement, the next generation tests are categorized as exceeding expectations from left to right, meeting expectations, partially meeting expectations, and not meeting expectations. So if you see proficient, that's basically someone who's meeting expectations or exceeding expectations, not proficient, partially or not in expectations. And student growth percentile is the change of a student's performance over time compared with other students who have similar score histories, otherwise known as academic peers, right? So if you see SGPs below 40, you're talking about low growth or very low growth. 40 and above, 40 to 60 is typical growth, 60 and above is high growth, and 80 to 89 is very high growth. So pay attention to those numbers and those ranges. What you'll find with us is we're mostly in the typical area. So if we go to the next one, this is just our ELA snapshot. So proficiency wise, we had 47.2% of our students meeting proficiency or above, which was a drop from last year. But if you look, again, we don't really want to look at last year. We want to look at 2019. So you go below 2019, not a surprise statewide. There was a drop. We're trending better than the state here. And there's the breakdown to the right from 2007 to 2022. And it's really not much to see there. We're, compared to ourselves, our SGP, our student growth percentile, has increased 9 points, and it is a 1 point increase above the state. So that's some good data there.
Okay, so, and you're going to see this throughout, like there'll be a whatever color that is, an aqua line, which is the district, and a dotted line, which is the state. And often we're above the district. In some instances we're above the state, the district's above the state, and some instances we're below the state, and in some other instances, particularly some of the stuff Christy's going to talk about, we're dramatically above the state.
And also, so we've differentiated this presentation in the various ways that you look at each school, sort of broken apart differently, so people can look at different tables from both Edwin and Open Architects. And so we can go to the math snapshot. Again, 40% proficiency compared to ourselves, up 7% compared to the state, above 2% above average. Our student growth percentiles, again, in the typical range, a really good jump, 18%, and compared to the state, just below the state average. So everyone across the state did really well. We did really well compared to ourselves, but we're just slightly below the state average. We move to the next. Okay. And then science, 51% proficient, 16 points above, percentage points above ourselves, comparatively 9 above the state. That's a really good jump we have there with science.
So this is interesting, and it's a little confusing. So students take science tests in 5th, 8th, and really 9th grade, but they call it 9th and 10th grade. So for the last few years, we were, and this is all those grades in aggregate, we were below the state, and now we're above the state. And then when we go school by school, you'll see where that is happening. Any questions so far? Okay.
So our next talks about accountability comparison. So accountability is the system that considers all of these, a lot of different things: achievement, student growth, high school completion, progress towards English proficiency, chronic absenteeism, and advanced coursework completion, all the things that we've talked about already, except for the advanced coursework completion. And you can see from 2018, I went back to 18, there's no numbers from 20 and 21. It's not comparable data. So I went back further years, 2018, And you can see that we have increased, we are, if you call this our baseline is higher now than it was previously in 2018. So we've made good progress with our accountability data. And that really talks about all the work in the middle that we've been doing with students and teachers. And that is a good sign for the work that we've been doing, is increasing our accountability data, which really focuses on the kids in the middle. And I'm sorry, and the kids in the lower end of the spectrum as well. So that includes the EL data that I presented previously. So if we break this down, again, we're talking about achievement gaps here, and the next three slides, breaking down the high needs categories. If we just, this is just to show you that the gaps still exist. If you look to the bottom right graph, you can see that we are closing the gap, but the gap still exists. Okay, that's really what we're showing here, and it breaks it down between the high school and the middle school. We go to the next slide, we look at our low income students. Again, while we're not on the state trajectory, we still are closing the gap. Right, no, sorry, I'm thinking about state. We are still, again, closing the gap. Again, 2021 are not comparable years. So we have actually lost a little here with our low income students, but as we talked about in the past, our low income percentage used to be, I think, Christy, we said it was like 10 years ago, it was 25%, and now we're at about 50%. So we've increased our low income student population dramatically. So it's not a surprise that these numbers are not a surprise. We still have a lot of work to do to close this gap. And if we can go to the EL language learners, again, we're only showing data from 22, and there's a gap there still, just to show you that while we are doing good work, our accountability data is really good. We still have gaps that we need to decrease. And then we move on to our comparisons to all the districts in the county. On the left, you'll see our comparison in ELA. We're second in the county, third with student growth percentile, and third with scale score. In the middle, you can see our scatter plot, and you can see Berkshire Hills in the dark green, and the other districts scattered about. And we're still in the, what you want to see here is you want to see us in the top right quadrant. So we are in the top right quadrant. So we're in good position there. And Peter talked about the data, how we can show it moving through the years, but we can't do that with these snapshots right now. But when we go to high needs comparison, again, we are second in the county. This is all the districts in the county. Second in the county, second in proficiency, second in SGP, and again, second in scale score. And again, we are on the top right quadrant in a good position. If we move to math, everyone in the state moved in math, so it's, we're a little behind a couple districts, but we're still fourth in proficiency, third in student growth percentile, and fourth in scale score. Again, we're in the top right quadrant. That is a good position to be in. And then we move to high needs, running through these quickly, sorry. Second in this is all of those subgroups put together. We have second in proficiency, third in student growth percentile, and third in scaled score. And again, we're right about in the middle there. We're just below the top right quadrant there.
What's interesting about this is typically sort of I don't want to say battle, but Lenox, Greylock, and Berkshire Hills often are like in the top three, and they trade places. What's interesting about this is that the people or the districts that are doing the strongest work here aren't the typical districts.
Right. And then if we move to science, we are first in proficiency and second in scale score. That's some great work, and that is in the 9th grade. The kids this last year, 9th graders took this test. So this is a snapshot of what the 9th grade did last year, and it's a really, really good sign.
So like you can't be any farther in the top right corner. It's almost off the chart.
Yep.
And this is the place where we edge out Lenox.
Yep. And then the next one is if you are science high needs category, we're first across the board there. So not only we're doing well with our non-high need students, but also with our high need students. So this is, again, this is a picture of the 9th grade last year, because they're the only ones who took this biology test. So that's some really good data there. So things that we noticed, our focus on social emotional learning and it has had a positive impact on student performance. Our accountability percentile improved across the board. Our achievement growth gaps still exist. Those gaps, unfortunately, in reality, public education are going to always exist, but what we want to do is make those gaps smaller, and we are on a good trend there. And our levels still, our achievement levels still can improve, because we saw where we were with achievement hovering around 50%. Our relative strengths are science with an exclamation point. Our math and achievement growth was good. Our language and reading is good, but as Peter said before, the writing is where we took the hit, and as did the rest of the state. Our relative weaknesses are again in these achievement gaps with our students with disabilities and our low income students. I think.
Okay, so now we're going to transition, and Katie, I think it makes sense for you to come up here and start looking at elementary school data, then middle school data, and then high school data. The charts that are here are from the Edwin data, and it's just another way of presenting it. And in each one, notice the grade level, and then notice the district bars versus the state bars.
Okay, so if you look on the top left, that's where you see basically what you want to see. You want to see to be above the state in both meeting and exceeding expectations, and you want to be below the state and partially meeting and not meeting expectations. So our 4th graders on the top in ELA, you can see the partially meeting is the green bar, which is much higher than the state and just slightly above.
No, I'm sorry, the green
exceeding.
bar is the meeting expectations.
Oh, sorry, meeting. What did I say?
Partially meeting.
Partially.
Yeah.
That's the meeting. Well, that's what we want. We want a good combination of meeting and exceeding. So the 4th grade ELA data is what we want to see. For 3rd grade, we were above the state in exceeding, but the others didn't meet the mark. But you can see that we are lower in orange, which is the partially meeting, but a little higher in the not meeting. The 3rd grade started those kiddos who had the most interrupted learning to read year. So like your second learning to read year got interrupted for our 3rd grade. 4th grade, you can expect higher scores from. The next slide is the same comparison for the math. And you can see that there are some bright spots for 4th grade math. We're above the state in meeting. And also we are below the state in partially. And then for 3rd grade, you'll see that we're above the state in exceeding and below the state in partially meeting. So those are some bright spots. I knew you were going to see a ton of these, so I just chose these 2 slides in the one area for ELA, because that seems to be our area where the 4th grade grew the most. So what I like to look at is the student growth percentile. And if you look, it's on the top right, and it's SGP. Now it's been messed up for the past couple years as far as growing, but our 4th graders who were low income, you can see that they grew almost as much as those who were not low income. That's a bright spot. For math, which is the next slide, the same idea. That is very promising behavior or results based on what I would say the lower class sizes and the more detailed instruction that everybody was able to get, not just the kiddos. But again, like John said, in those two areas, we are below, but we're not going to focus on the gap because we are meeting it where a lot of districts did not.
Okay, thanks. So John and I will both talk through the middle school data. Middle school is the most tested school of all the schools, so they test in 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, in English and math in all of those grades, and then in science in 5th and 8th grade. So we'll talk about those. We'll talk about IEP, low income, and race. So this first slide is English across all grades in the middle school. You see the trend compared to the state. It was sort of the same as the state, then dipped a little, then was the same as the state, then dipped a little, and then came up. And so the state and the district are very similar. The student growth percentile, the column on the right, is right around 50. And then in the middle, the performance by year, 19 was the stronger year, and then the last 2 years have been lower years. This next one is math, right?
Yep.
So it's up a little from last year, and the student growth percentage is up quite a bit from last year, but compared to the state, it's still a little low. But you look at 21 versus 22, and there's some progress, but we're not quite where we were in 19. Okay, and this student growth is a little bit this side of 50. The next one is the science. So it's a little bit better than last year, but it continues to be worse than the state. There are no growth numbers for science. This next list is kids with IEPs versus kids without IEPs. So the gap or opportunity gap between kids with IEPs and without IEPs around proficiency is quite dramatic. The gap around growth is pretty narrow, and the average scores, there's some difference, but not huge. The next one is math for the similar subsets. The proficiency gap is large. The student growth gap is not as large, and things are starting to move in a better direction. And this last one is science. There are no student growth numbers in science, and it's moving up, which is the slight win there. Low income, a similar one. The gap in terms of student growth is relatively small, and the average scaled score is relatively small. The numbers that are proficient is significant.
And that's ELA.
Right. This one's low income around ELA. Some more of the same. This is one where the low income students in terms of growth are outperforming the non-low income students, and also their which is unusual. Low income science, again, there are no growth numbers, and the proficiency gap is larger. The average scale score gap is smaller. Okay. This now is around race, and all these different bars represent different subgroups. So the blue bar are Asian, the next bar is Black, Hispanic, multi-race, Pacific Islander, and white.
Then there's ELA, then math, and then science.
Okay, so the ELA, math, I'm sorry, and now science. Okay, so that's where we are with the middle school, and obviously Ben can speak to more detail there. Christy, you want to come up and talk through this?
Okay, so the first slide we're looking at for Monument Mountain is both the ELA and the math comparison to performance of the state. And you can see in our ELA performance last year, we were slightly above the state in exceeding just slightly. And we're pretty substantially above the state in meeting expectations, so that was good. In our math performance last year, we were actually a little under in exceeding expectations and over in meeting. So we were performing in line with the state. The next two slides show performance over 3 years, again, with that gap of 2020 not being there. So our performance in ELA, again, remembering we are in line with the state. So while our exceeding expectations is lower for 2022, that actually was in line with the state's performance as well. And the meeting expectations is up pretty substantially for ELA. And then when you look at math over time, our performance in 2022 did drop in terms of compared to our own performance. We were pretty close to the state performance. So that was a common theme across the state in terms of meeting and exceeding expectations on last year's MCAS. The highlight for us, as John and Peter have already alluded to, was around our 9th grade biology. If you look at our performance compared to the state, we outperformed the state by just a little in exceeding, but we really outperformed the state by quite a substantial amount on our meeting expectations in biology. So this was our 9th grade course where we made the shift last year in our programming, and the teachers were restructuring instruction. This was not teaching to the test. This was working towards the proficiency-based model. And on the next slide, you'll see the breakdown both with the state at the bottom and we're at the top, but the comparison across the county. So we were 24 percentage points higher than the state when you add together the meeting and exceeding expectations category. We were higher than all other schools in Berkshire County. Only 7% of our students did not meet the target. And I do just want to call out that 3 of those students were actually retaking in chemistry. They weren't our biology students that are reporting out in science. So we're really, really proud. I'm so proud of my team that was working in 9th grade with those kiddos last year on this.
And let me just pause and editorialize for a second. So this is a huge deal, and I don't know if everybody gets the significance of this. We try to not be too focused on test scores. This is potentially a really important leading indicator. It's our first external measure of what's going on in our leveled up 9th grade. And I think the 3 teachers, so Elsa, Bethany, and Jamie should really be celebrated. And then the work they did in this other context is really quite remarkable. All right, so let's stay tuned. But I think this portends well for what may happen next year when these same, or this year when these same students take math and English assessments. The other thing, like, and everybody knows I've got a kid who is part of this. It's not teaching to the tests. They felt, and he felt really engaged, and people who are fired up about biology. So I think it's really neat.
And on slide 40, it's a breakdown just of our high needs. I know slide 40, if we've ever done a 40 slide show on MCAS, but on slide 40, it's a breakdown for high needs students only. 44% of students at Monument who took the exam were in our high needs category. So I do want to highlight that percentage of students in that group is a growing percentage of our population, and our performance at the meet and exceeds was more than double the state's percentage. And you can see how we performed across the county. So 54% of our students were in meeting and exceeding for our high needs students. And the average scaled score for students in the high needs group hit that 500 mark, which is the meeting expectation mark for the state. So it's really good that our average score was there. I did include 2 slides with AP data as well. I was specifically looking not in comparison to 2020 and 2021, but I was looking in comparison to the 2018-19 school years. And I'm happy to see that in terms of the number of exams and students taking tests, we're right back up into the range we had been. We had 82% of our students who took exams have a score of 3 or higher. And I will apologize on slide 42 for the formatting. I was trying to figure out how to provide you with a lot of information, but on just one slide. And so I did the breakdown for every AP test we give, the total number of exams, and then the average score. And again, I was looking at each one of those subject areas, how we were doing compared to 2018-19, both in terms of the number of students we have participating in our AP, and then also their performance. And in general, I was really pleased. There's a few places that we can identify that we still have some room for growth, both in terms of trying to engage more students and in terms of trying to support them in hitting that 3, 4, or 5 mark, which is what would potentially get them their college credit if they choose to do that.
And a really interesting thing, in a number of places, more students took the exams and the average score went up, right? So that's a really big deal. It's easy to go the other direction and have fewer kids take the tests and the scores go up, because then you're just not letting people take tests, right? But if more people are taking them and the scores are going up, that's really exciting.
Thanks.
Okay. So I'm going to get to this slide in a sec, but I think I want to pause around the MCAS. 40 slides is an abomination, and I'm sorry to do that to you. I think when you get the printed copy or the electronic copy of it, and then you can potentially print it out and mark it up, it'll be much more manageable and digestible. Are there any questions or wonderings people have now? And it may just be too much to digest, and it's totally fine to say, I'll come back to you when I'm able to dig into it more.
I'll come back to you.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that is exemplary on my rubric of responses. So let's plan on doing that. The other slide I have right in front of you, we're trying really hard to have clear, transparent, obvious, and accessible language around our work. And again, this is something the students bring up, something the teachers bring up all the time. This is our sort of first shot at it, and I wanted to share it with you as a transitional document to our next meeting, when we're going to go into really granular detail about proficiency work. But they're really 4 goals: proficiencies, teacher leadership, community engagement, and making equity connections across all areas. And this is the work we're doing in those areas. Stay tuned. This is just a teaser. It'll be clearer when we present this at our next meeting.
Can I just make a comment?
Yeah.
I don't have a question, I just have a comment because it's gonna be my last chance to say this. About, and to the public also. Peter's article that accompanies this is really an important article. There was also a discussion on the scores from Commonwealth Magazine that also had a wonderful analysis. It is important to note that MCAS originally was proposed in 1993 to close the gap in income levels and between various racial groups. That has not occurred since it was created. The state continually uses this as a model for schools. It should be noted that this was never the intent of MCAS to rate schools as high-low or good or bad. It was a creation of the Business Alliance and the Boston Globe. And U.S. News and World Report now has jumped on the bandwagon and uses MCAS scores. So the public should know that various schools do various types of emphasis on these. There are schools that test prep, and that's become a big issue. How much attention do grades get on improving scores? Schools sometimes set aside 3 to 4 weeks of test prep to prepare. Then they have rallies, okay? I'm not saying anything about that. I'm just saying that that is not reflected in the original purpose of MCAS, okay? The data does not indicate what the major impact on all of this, all of your slides. What's the major impact? And it's not school, it's outside school influences. What are those? Family, economic levels of the community, social and emotional variables. And if you want to know, just look at the scores and what we've seen in our district versus other schools in our district. I will name them. If you look at Pittsfield, North Adams, and Houston, look at their scores versus Lennox, Mount Greylock, Berkshire Hills. It's pretty obvious that the MCAS scores reflect the zip codes that MCAS was taking. My own personal thing is that the AP scores really don't show us anything because that material depends on the teacher, the teaching style, and the emphasis. And also, this whole thing on AP credit is itself a kind of a sell job by the college board because a lot of schools now are reviewing the credit and that you might not get college credit. What you'll be asked to do is to take an upper level or an alternative course. And so you have to take some of those results in at your own volition, I guess. That's my comment. The last time on this committee, I'll be able to say something about my disdain for standardized tests that are used wrong. And I like this district because we do not do that. And I am going to give credit to the administration and the teaching staff. And I was part of that for a long time, the latter. We don't do that here. We're not a district that test preps. We don't push it. We look at the whole student and we pay a lot of attention and try to influence those out of school variables. And we do a marvelous job. And just look at Project Connection and how many kids we involve in that wonderful program that aren't reflected in MCAS.
Bill,
To remind you, since you're talking about leaving, in the late 90s, early 2000s, the history department came to this school committee and wanted assurance, A, we wouldn't teach to the test. And secondly, that we wouldn't change our curriculum. And thirdly, they wanted us not to have our students take the test. And And your view has been consistent all along and hasn't changed. And we actually talked about not taking the MCAS out until the principal at the time found out she would lose her license. And so we had to rescind that. That was not one of our better moments, but we took a stand for 2 weeks. Yeah. So I appreciate the fact that you have been consistent for way too many years. You and I have been doing this.
Bill, I also think there's one more meeting you're can
Yes.
still come to as
Yes.
an elected school committee member, so you don't have to
Yeah.
wrap it all up tonight.
I appreciate the gesture for, I have been consistent.
Mm.
And I will again say, this district, one of the things that I emphasize is this district does say, this is our MCAS score, it's the first type of aspect. And I think that helps us attract students and parents who see they see behind the veil of MCAS. So hopefully we'll continue to lift that veil more.
Thanks. Any other comments? Okay, we'll continue this. So we talked about AP. We'll bring back some additional stuff around SAT, ACT, and the seal of biliteracy. Those are other measures that can be interesting. The Regional School District Planning Board is chugging along. You may have read some articles in local media about it. Sometimes how things are written don't totally capture the complexity of what's going on. We had a strong meeting last time, and I look forward to seeing how we're going to progress. It looks like our next big group meeting might have a facilitator, and we'll see where things land there. The building committee's got a meeting coming up on the 13th. And we're going to specifically talk about the handful of deliverables that are due on the 31st of October. And that's some work around enrollment and CBTE. I think that's it for me, Steve.
Good.
Yeah, we could go to the policy reports or
Let's go back to
subcommittee
the
minutes.
minutes, because as the meeting started, we were so involved in technology. And that is not an emptiness for us. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes of September 22nd, 2022? So moved. Do I have a second? Second by Ann, motion by Bill. Any discussion? Roll call vote. Ann. Aye. Jason. Aye. Molly.
Aye.
Bill. Yes. Diane.
Yes.
Corey.
Aye.
And it's unanimous. Okay, got that out of the way. Policy subcommittee reports has not met. Buildings and grounds, Jason. Have not met. Superintendent's evaluation has not met. Technology, we could meet and just talk about the next thing. Finance subcommittee, just so anyone who is trying to join tonight's meeting at 5 o'clock, we, guess what, had technology problems. And we did not have a meeting, and we will take the 2 topics that were to be discussed and divide them up at another meeting. So there was no meeting tonight of the finance subcommittee. Extracurricular appointments?
Yeah, so this is one of the longest lists of extracurricular appointments we've had. A lot of things that are school-based, a lot of things that are tied to Project Connection. And one thing I'd like to highlight, there are a number of paid student interns that are working with younger students, and I think that's a neat opportunity.
Business operations, Sharon.
Well, we have the fourth quarter, sorry for the delay, report, and it's pretty typical. The first few, I'm just pulling it up here again. I'm sorry. Yeah, be good, thanks. The first 4 are typical operational changes, covering additional stipends, hardware, and then our typical text, because as we discuss often, we set the budget and in February, and then by September, we either have more students or different student needs, as John was talking about DSL students coming in, or we have additional special needs students. So we adjust the budget for that. And then the remaining transfers are mine that I do to balance the budget at the end of the year. And then there's one correction where I did a change and had to move it back. Any questions?
Do you want to vote on it? or-
Yes,
Do we know?
yeah, we do.
I thought
Well,
before
it-
it said we did.
Well, when in doubt, we vote on it. It never hurts. We're supposed to, it's good, if we're not supposed to, it doesn't matter. Do I have a motion to approve the FY 22 quarter 4 transfer overview in detail? Second. Any discussion? Roll call vote. Ann? Aye. Jason? Aye. Molly?
Aye.
Bill? Yes. Diane?
Yes.
Corey? And aye, it is unanimous. Thank you, Sharon. Any older new business before the committee? Any public comment? Yeah,
Amanda.
Amanda Hoffman, go ahead. You're unmuted.
Hi, how are you guys?
Good.
I just had a question about benchmark reports for families. In the district where I work, I know that I just got all the benchmark letters ready to go out to families. And I know that I don't ever get the STAR 360 result parent reports unless I specifically ask the school for them. And I'm wondering if the school committee would adopt a policy to send these results home to families so that we have regular information 3 times a year about how our kids are benchmarking.
It's a really interesting idea. I think we need to take a little time to talk about it as an administrative staff and to talk about it with the school committees. So people have context. The STAR 360 things are like formative assessments that give us feedback around how students are doing, particularly making progress, and then we use that to make shifts in instruction. Some districts share them, some don't, but it's worth us having a conversation about.
So it will be on a future agenda to talk about.
Okay, yeah, no, that would be great. I mean, I know the parent reports for MCAS are coming home and you have to mail them. But maybe they could just take a ride, at least in the MCAS grades, in the same envelope if you guys have a chance to talk about it before then.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Anyone else? Not seeing anyone? So by unanimous?
Oh, there's one more.
Is there one?
Yes, Steve Boyd.
Oh, good. Yeah, thank you. Steve, go ahead.
You guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, great. Really quickly, Bill Fields, I can appreciate the intersectionality within which you reference MCAS as being imperfect data. I just want to say that I really appreciate the quantitative metrics and the way that it provides us a little bit of context around what's happened. Of course, there's been a downturn in some numbers relative to COVID. That makes sense. But as we move through change and transition in the district, I think that quantitative metrics like the MCAS or some other benchmark, you guys can decide which is the best way to show us progress. But I really appreciate quantitative metrics and key performance indicators as something that would be nice to come back to. 40 slides or 10, if you can try to make them meaningful, I think that it's an important part of understanding the impact we're all trying to have and the yeoman's work that all of you are doing.
Thanks, Steve. Anyone else? Not seeing anyone, so by unanimous consent, we are adjourned.